If you're sitting down this summer to plan a unit or a whole course, and the first thing you're doing is looking for activities, I want to stop you right there. Not because activities don't matter, they do. But here's the thing, activities are not actually the starting point. And I say that as someone who planned that way for years, like years. And I have the middle school curriculum to prove it.
Welcome to the Secondary Teacher Podcast, the podcast for middle and high school teachers juggling multiple preps to get the strategies to reduce overwhelm so that you don't have to choose between being an effective teacher and prioritizing important relationships. I'm your host, Khristen a 10-year high school engineering teacher, former middle school assistant principal, and teacher coach. Every week, we will discuss strategies, systems, and time-saving tips to help you not only survive but thrive as a multiple prep teacher.
So today, I want to talk about what unit planning actually looks like when you start in the right place, because I don't think I did it for a long time. And I think a lot of secondary teachers are in the same boat, especially if you're teaching CTE or elective courses and building things yourself. Let's get into it. Okay, so early in my teaching career, I got assigned a course that nobody else in my district was teaching. No colleague down the hall, no curriculum waiting for me, no examples to follow. Just a course name, a list of standards, and the expectation that I figure it out. So I went looking, and I found something. A unit layout. Actually, a pretty detailed one for exactly the course I was teaching. It had activities, projects, a sequence. It felt like, okay, this is what I needed. And I looked at it and thought, I can make this work for high school students. We'll be fine. So I built my course around it. And for a while, things felt okay. Students were busy, they were building things, experimenting, working on projects. The room had energy. I genuinely thought we were doing good work. But here's the thing about not knowing what you don't know. You can't see the gap until something forces you to look directly at it. That moment came when I submitted a request for some manufacturing equipment. Injection molding, specific tools I wanted to bring in to demonstrate plastic forming at a higher level. And my CTE director came back to me and said something I was not expecting. This is what we usually purchase for middle schools. We'd rather you get something more appropriate for high school. Are you sure this is what you want? And I just remember, because I hadn't connected it yet. I knew the curriculum I'd found had been written for younger students. I really did. I assumed I could apply it to my high school students and it would translate, that I could kind of lift it up to their level. But the equipment request made it visible in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. The curriculum I was using wasn't just slightly below grade level. It was written for middle schoolers, and I had been teaching it to students who were taking AP Physics at their home school. Yeah, I wasn't doing them any favors. And not because I didn't care, not because I wasn't trying, but because I had never stopped to ask the most important question. What should high school students actually be able to produce in this course? I was asking, what activities can I do? And I was finding answers. They just happened to be calibrated for the wrong level. And I had no benchmark to measure them against. I didn't know what I didn't know. Here's what I did next. I didn't defend the curriculum. I didn't argue that it would be fine. I turned around and said, okay, if I don't know what high school level outcomes look like for this course, I need to go find something that can help me answer that question. And the search led me somewhere that came with a fully developed curriculum, equipment lists, and a clear picture of what students should actually be able to do by the end. I'm not telling you that to recommend any specific program, because honestly, not everyone has access to those kinds of resources, and they don't solve everything anyway. What I'm telling you is that the pivot itself is the lesson. When you can't answer what should my students ultimately be able to produce on your own, go find something that helps you answer it. It might be a curriculum program, it might be an industry certification framework, it might be the EOC exam breakdown we talked about in episode 335, the one that shows you which standards carry the most weight. It might be a colleague in another district who has taught this before. It might be professional standards from an industry organization. The source matters less than the question it helps you answer. What does high school level mastery actually look like in this course? Start there. Activities are not the starting point. Outcomes are. And until you know what students should ultimately be able to produce at the right level, for the right age, with the right every activity you choose is just a guess. Sometimes a really good guess, but still a guess. I want to name something before we get into the framework because I think context matters here. When you're teaching a course that nobody else is teaching or a course that barely existed 5 years ago, there is no established benchmark for what high school level mastery looks like. There's no AP rubric, no standardized test to reverse engineer, no department full of colleagues who have done it before and can tell you by the end of Unit 3, students should be able to do this. You're building that benchmark yourself, and that is genuinely hard work. It's curriculum design work, the kind we talked about in episode 336, the kind that doesn't get recognized or compensated, but happens anyway, usually at night, usually over summers. And in that vacuum, it's really easy to default to what activities can I find? Because activities are tangible, they're findable, they feel like progress. Outcomes are harder. They require you to imagine a finished product before you've built anything. They require you to ask, what does excellent look like here? When you're not always sure yourself. But that question, as uncomfortable as it is, that's the one that changes everything. Okay, so what does this actually look like in practice? 3 questions, in this order. Question 1, what should students be able to produce by the end of this unit? Not what will we cover, not what activities will we do, what will students make, demonstrate, create, or show that proves they learned something meaningful? In a CT or career technical education classroom, that might be a finished product, a working prototype, a process demonstration, a portfolio entry, or a performance task. In an elective classroom, a performance, a presentation, a creative project, an applied skill. The more specifically you can answer this question, the more the rest of the unit starts to organize itself. Question 2. What do students need before they can get there? This is where your introduced practice phases come from. Once you know what students are working toward, you can work backward and ask, what do they need to encounter first? What do they need time to practice? Where are they going to get stuck? Activities stop feeling random when they're in service of a clear outcome. A lab becomes practice for a specific skill. A discussion becomes a way to introduce a concept. A project becomes the evidence of a whole unit of learning, not just something to keep students busy. Question 3. Where are students starting from? This is the one that I skipped constantly. I tended to assume students either knew nothing or all started at the same level, and neither one of those is usually true. Secondary students walk in with wildly different background knowledge, experiences, skill levels, and confidence. And when you skip this step, you either oversimplify, which, hi, that was me with the middle school curriculum, or you overcomplicate unnecessarily. A pre-assessment doesn't have to be a formal test. It can be a conversation, a brainstorm, a show of hands, a few questions on a sticky note, but knowing where students are starting from changes what you introduce, how long you practice, and what you can reasonably expect them to produce. That information is worth 10 minutes at the start of any unit. I want to come back to something uncomfortable. My engineering students were taking AP Physics, and then they walked into my classroom, and looking back, some of what I was making them do was sitting a lot closer to middle school rigor than high school rigor. They were having fun, they were building things, the room had energy, I thought we were doing well, but I wasn't pushing them as far as they could go. And I don't say this to be hard on myself or on any teacher who has been in a similar situation, because when you don't have a clear picture of what high school level outcomes look like, you genuinely cannot calibrate rigor. You're doing your best with what you have. But once you define the outcome, once you ask, what should a high school student actually be able to produce here? Rigor stops being a vague concept. It becomes a design decision. You're not just asking, will students be engaged with this? You're asking, is this intellectually worthy of what these students are capable of? That's a harder question. And that's the right one. Activities matter. Engagement matters. Hands-on learning matters, especially in CTE and elective classrooms where the whole point is that students are doing something real. But activities without outcomes, they create busyness, even really engaging busyness. And your students deserve more than that. They deserve classrooms where the fun thing and the rigorous thing are the same thing, where a project is engaging because it's genuinely challenging, not just because it's hands-on. That's what outcome-first unit planning makes possible. So before you open Pinterest this summer, before you start collecting activities and projects and labs and simulations, ask yourself, what should students ultimately be able to produce? Answer that first. Then go find the activities that get them there. If you're just getting started, make sure you grab the free secondary teacher planning calendar in the show notes. It's designed specifically for secondary teachers and CTE teachers managing multiple courses who need to see the whole picture without feeling like every unit has to start from scratch. And if you want to build your first outcome-aligned unit with a repeatable structure underneath it, with support from other multiple prep teachers doing the same work, the Unit Planning Lab waitlist is in the show notes. Finish something that makes tomorrow lighter. I'll see you next time.